Back to SaberSim's DFS Office Hours. It is Friday, November 26th of 2021, Black Friday here today. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving and maybe a profitable Thanksgiving if you were playing DFS yesterday. I didn't do too bad, actually. Ended up having a pretty decent day. Ended up binking the first showdown at the lower stakes. Of course, where I like to grind, sharing that with, I think, like 15 others, so wasn't able to get a unique lineup there, but set the day up pretty well for myself. Ended up doing okay in the main slate stuff too. A profitable showdown for me in the Cowboys-Raiders game, and then just a terrible effort from me in that last game showdown. I played a little bit of DFS in pretty much every game going on yesterday, which I always like to do for the Thanksgiving Day slates, but had a lovely Thanksgiving overall, so I hope you guys all did as well. Should be kind of a little bit of an interesting stream here today. I don't really have too many questions overall in my queue. Wasn't entirely sure what kind of audience I was going to get here on this stream live here today. I know I hope that many of you are still having an opportunity to spend some time with your families here, especially if you're traveling or maybe you're out shopping and taking advantage of some of those deals that are going on today out there. But we do, of course, have an 11-game NBA slate going on here tonight. There's an NHL slate. There's an afternoon NHL slate here going on today as well. So the DFS grind never stops. Before we go ahead and dive into what I do want to talk about here today, the questions that I do have, I do want to mention there is a Black Friday promo going on now for SaberSim. You can get 12 months of SaberSim, a full year of access to the app for the price of only 6 months. You are essentially getting 50% off and locking that rate in now. You will see a pop-up, a message prompting you to check that out the next time you go into the app. There's also probably an email sitting in your email inbox from Andy about that promo. So highly recommend checking that out. Really an amazing deal to lock in a ton of SaberSim at a great value there. But what we are going to do here, again, I don't really have too much questions here today, but I did get an email in through support that I wanted to talk about a little bit. So if you have questions, go ahead and pop them into the Office Hours channel in Slack or the YouTube chat, and we will get to things in the order that they come in. But what we're going to do here is we're going to do I'm going to call it an end-to-end demo of SaberSim. Had a question from a user come in through support. It sounded like just running into a lot of troubles, even, starting from the very beginning process of reserving entries on the sites, to building lineups on SaberSim, to using the entry editor to get those lineups into your entries, and then to late swap after. So I'm going to do kind of a quick demo at the very least just on DraftKings. If we have time and there are no questions coming in, I'll probably do another quick one through on FanDuel, but literally just a complete end-to-end walkthrough of how to do this. Not going to talk a lot about strategy here of like how to think about editing your lineups or anything like that, but just want to do kind of a full tutorial walkthrough because I think it's a good day to do that with not a lot of other questions in our queue. So give me just a second here to get the app pulled up, and we'll get DraftKings pulled up as well, and we'll go ahead and start talking about this here. And okay, cool. So we've got DraftKings. So we'll actually start here, right? So reserving your entries for the day. There's definitely a few different ways to go about doing this. I actually end up using my phone often, but if you're going to use the desktop, I'll kind of show you my favorite way of reserving just a bunch of entries all at once. And so typically what I like to do is I'll go to NBA and click on the slate that we are playing, right? I'm playing Classic, so we're playing the main slate tonight. And I am focusing mostly on a lot of these contests under $3, mostly tournaments. So we'll go ahead and filter by those two things here on the left. We have a lot of videos on our YouTube channel about contest selection, so not really going to dive too deep into why I'm picking the contests I am here, but I'm playing contests that are always the best contests according to our contest selection principles. So basically the first thing we'll want to do is just pick one here, right? So I'll pick the daily dollar, and we just want to get a dummy lineup in. So when I say a dummy lineup, what we're going to do is basically we're just going to put real players in here that we think are probably going to play. We're going to try to use as much salary as possible, not spend too much time on this, thinking about this, because we're going to replace it basically immediately. But what we'll go ahead and do here is just start picking some players here that can fill this lineup out. And again, really not spending too much time worrying about this here. Roughly want to try to use as much salary as possible to fill this in. Oh, that's going to be way too much. Because if we somehow end up in a strange situation where we can't swap this out, then we at least know that we've got like something resembling an actual lineup in here. There we go. Okay. But not going to spend a lot of time on this here. And then we can go ahead and I'm not going to use my crowns here because I'm weird about my crowns. And we'll go ahead and click enter. And it's going to enter this one entry here. And then we're going to get to this bulk entry screen, which is probably the easiest way to just quickly enter a bunch of contests all at once. So what we'll go ahead and do here is we can click bulk enter. And then I like to go ahead and again, set some of the same filters. I'll actually do $5 because I think I play up to these $5 contests and do tournaments. And I've been playing like roughly $50 in volume most nights recently. And I have been filling it up in typically kind of the same contest. So I play this $2 single entry. I've been playing this hot shot, $3 3 max. I've been maxing the and one, playing the high five, both high fives in this case, and quarter jukebox. And that is about it. That's probably fine for right now. So all I've done here is I've gone ahead and said basically I'm adding all of these entries to this lineup, right? So I've got all of these entries here, and then it's going to total this all up for me nice and clean here, and I can hit submit, and I am very quickly entered into all of my contests on DraftKings. So this says submitted, and we're all good to go. So that is probably the easiest way to reserve entries on DraftKings here using the desktop. Again, a little bit different if you end up doing this on a phone or on the app or something like that, but on desktop, that is the easiest way to do that. So we're all set here. So now the very next thing we want to do is go over to SaberSim. So this is NFL. Let's go ahead and switch over to NBA. And we can immediately use the entry editor here to basically just see all of the contests that we have just entered. So hang on, I'm going to refresh here because I think we're a little stuck. My computer here today has been running a little bit slow all day, so be patient with me if we have a little bit of slowness on stream here today. But okay, cool. So we can go over to SaberSim now. We're on the main slate, right? We're on the same slate we just entered, and then we can go over to the entry editor and really kind of conveniently just validate basically that we entered all those contests. So if you click this download template file from DraftKings, this is going to go to DraftKings and it's going to download your entry file that includes all of your entries for this particular slate, all in just one button press. So we can click this, it's going to go there, it's going to download it. So you can see up here in the upper right, it just started downloading and the download finishes. I'm going to just drag the file in here and load it in. Right. You could also click the button there that says browse or whatever and go find where the file downloads, but it typically just downloads to your downloads folder on your computer. You can load it in and you can see exactly as we just did a second ago on DraftKings. We're all set here, right? This is our dummy lineup we had put in of just random guys. We have 47 entries for exactly $47, which is kind of interesting actually. And we're all good to go, right? So now let's say it's approaching lock. Or really, honestly, you should do this probably as soon as you load in your entries file. But let's say we're like actually building kind of our final lineups for lock. So again, I'm not going to have like a very strategy-minded approach here. I'm not going to really be talking about like what you might want to do from a strategy perspective, but more from a how-to, right? What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to click build lineups. And we want to pick, in this particular case, for my set of lineups, right, there's a lot of different ways to do this, but my main thing is I just want to do one build and I want a unique lineup into every single contest I'm playing, right? So I know I'm playing some single entries and some 3 maxes and some different size contests. But what I typically do is I set these sliders at the contest where most of my money is invested, which is that $1 20 max. So I'm going to set the sliders like this, and I'm just going to build 47 lineups. And I know that I'm probably going to have lineups that have maybe a little bit higher ownership fade and variance than would be default for a single entry, but I'm okay being a little bit more aggressive with my variance and my ownership fade for those contests. I just want a unique entry into every single lineup. So I'm going to go ahead and do this here, and we'll build some lineups. It'll be a good opportunity for me to see a little bit of what the slate is looking like today here as well, because I haven't really looked at it at all so far. So I think I'm getting some computer slowness here. It has been bugging me all day, and I told myself I was going to restart before I started my stream, and then I forgot about it. So let's see. One sec here. Let me go ahead and get this all straightened out on my end first. Just a minute here. Okay. So we've got the build running here now. Pull this back up. Okay, so our build is running. I just had to do a quick hard refresh there. So the build is running here. We'll let this pull up. And okay, so we've got our 2 changes that we need to make here to unlock the DraftKings lineup. So for the sake of being quick here, maybe we'll just say, maybe we don't want to be at 100% Jokic exposure, right? That might be a good one. And maybe we've got kind of a, I don't know, maybe we've got a gut call kind of feeling about Anthony Edwards. Maybe we want 60% exposure to Anthony Edwards, something like that. Cool. We'll go ahead and click save. And our lineups are saved. And now we're going to go back to the entry editor. And we can load these lineups in. So we're going to click the fill contest with lineups. And we've got a few different options here. In this particular case, I just want a unique lineup into every single entry, right? So I'm going to use the unique fill method. If we used rank, it's going to take the #1 SaberScore lineup from that build we just ran and enter it as the first lineup into every single one of these contests. Then use the next best SaberScoring lineup and enter it as the next lineup into the contests that still have room for it, so not the single entries, and so on. But I want a unique lineup into every single contest. I'm using unique. And we'll go ahead and click apply here. And we can see all of a sudden our exposures are coming through here as well. All of our lineups have populated, and we're all good. So getting these lineups onto DraftKings is now just as easy as it was to get the entries in here in the first place. It's basically just like one button click away. And the way we do that is we're going to click download all entries. And we're going to click download and open DraftKings. And what that's going to do is it's going to prompt us. In this case, I'm being prompted to save the file. It might happen automatically on your computer, depending on what your settings are. But again, it's just going to save up here. And then we can go to upload CSV. So it's taking you immediately to the right page on DraftKings. It opens this page for you automatically. And you click upload CSV, and you just upload the file that you just downloaded. And you're going to get this message that 47 entries have been edited. You're all set there, right? So simple as that for getting your lineups in. That's kind of your process up to lock, right? You get your final lineups in. Definitely recommend for a sport like NBA doing this probably, as close as to lock as you can feel comfortable that you can get it all in time. But definitely wouldn't start doing any crazy research or lineup building before an hour, 30 minutes even before lock with how late NBA news breaks. Definitely something you want to be doing up against lock, but you don't want to miss lock because you waited too long. So especially as you're getting familiar with the steps here, give yourself some time to do these things. But I think once you really know what you're doing and you've practiced this and you've done this at least for a few slates, the mechanical process of stepping through this and uploading my entries file, filling my lineups and loading to me now at this point really takes sometimes 30 seconds or less. So you can really be pretty comfortably right up against lock and get things in time. But of course, with NBA and really any sport, it doesn't necessarily stop there. There is also late swap. So I want to talk a little bit about what the late swap process might look like. That also starts with the entry editor, and it starts with this swap button here. So when news breaks, if there is somebody that gets ruled out after lock, probably the safest thing to do first is to use the quick swap button. And it's going to open up quick swap and basically what's going to say here is you can do this with a specific player, but at a baseline, it will allow you to remove all out players with the best available player that it can put in just based on the projections at that particular time and the salary remaining in the lineup. And if you click apply and download, you're going to get this. It's immediately going to download a new entries file for you, and you'll also get a summary of the changes made to your lineups that show up here. In this case, there are no out players. The slate's not in progress, so nothing happened. But let's say that Anthony Edwards got ruled out or something like that. Maybe he's sitting for some reason, right? It would say we removed Anthony Edwards from 67 lineups or whatever it is, and we replaced him with these players and these lineups. And it's going to immediately download a new entries file. You just go right back to DraftKings and upload it from here, right? And that takes just a couple seconds. But the better thing to do when you have the time for it is to actually do a full late swap build. So you get to that by clicking late swap. That's going to open up a familiar looking build settings. You're only going to be able to late swap the number of lineups you have entered, the number of unique lineups you have entered. Let me be clear there. But you can change your settings around here. Otherwise, I like to leave these generally about the same. But again, let's say Anthony Edwards was ruled out, just as an example here. And while we used quick swap to quickly get him out of all of our lineups, we also want to make sure that we get like more Karl Anthony Towns, right? And maybe we get some more D'Angelo Russell, or is I don't even know if Josh Okogie's playing or if he's healthy now, but like, these other Minnesota players. So in that case, we want to do a late swap build. So what we do is we'll just go ahead and click late swap 47 lineups, and it's going to start this build in basically the same way. Going to rebuild just these 47 lineups. And we'll get a new build page here. So we have some new lineups now, right? Obviously, Anthony Edwards is still projected, not actually out, but hypothetically somebody's out. Maybe it's Jokic. Jokic might be a better example because he's legitimately questionable. So that's actually probably like the better example for sure here. Once this is done, right? Your build is complete. You've late swapped. You have this download new entries button here. This is all you need to get these entries into DraftKings, right? One thing I see people get confused on is they end up going back to the entry editor and refilling. You don't need to do that because at this point, we already know what contests you're playing. We know what contests that these lineups were originally in. So you can just click download new entries, and this is just going to download a brand new entry file, right? So again, it downloaded up here. You can kind of see that. And if we just go right back to DraftKings now, we can upload the new file that we just downloaded and upload again. And then when we go to the entry editor, so let's say it's later and we need a late swap again, you can actually see that it kind of now it's tracking our lineups throughout the night, right? So these lineups are no longer filled with the lineups that were in the GPP 12:12 p.m. build, right? They're filled with the 12:18 p.m. build, that was the late swap build, right? So you can get to see that here now. If for whatever reason you're ever late swapping your lineups and something goes wrong, right? Maybe you upload to DraftKings and it says wrong, there's an error and we can't swap. Typically what is happening is that somehow what is in SaberSim has gotten out of sync with what is in DraftKings. And maybe you did some hand build rebuilding, right? Maybe you ran some builds on SaberSim and filled them, but then decided not to upload, or somehow, right, something got out of sync with what SaberSim thinks your lineups are and what DraftKings thinks your lineups are. You can fix that very, very easily by just clicking upload new entries and clicking this download template file from DraftKings again. It goes back to DraftKings, gets a new fresh entry file, and then you can upload that file here. And it basically resets. So you're going to get this message saying, are you sure you want to overwrite? You click yes, and it's just going to reset everything back to the way it was, or back to what your actual real entries are on DraftKings. So I know this definitely comes up, especially for people using this tool for the first time, especially when you don't have a lot of time left. You've only got a couple minutes left to late swap. You see a message on DraftKings, panic, errors. Easiest thing to do, always brand new entry file, start there and go from there. So that is a very quick end-to-end demo here on the DraftKings side. I think, if you are playing on FanDuel, it's a very similar process. Let's see. Let me see if I have any questions that have come in here so far. I don't see any. So I think what we'll do is I will just continue and we'll do a quick demo on the FanDuel side. Do the exact same thing, talking about FanDuel since I have the time for it. But if you guys have questions, go ahead and pop them into chat here. I do see actually a couple that are trickling in live here. I am going to go ahead and do a quick FanDuel demo just because I think it would be helpful. So we'll go ahead and hop over to FanDuel. I think FanDuel is just like maybe a little bit trickier. So maybe it's good to walk through this. There are a few things that are completely automated on DraftKings that are a little less automated on FanDuel. So, but we'll go ahead. We'll talk about this here and go from there. So FanDuel, we'll do NBA here again. Click the main slate and let's do something. Let's do it like this because it's easier when we have multiple entries again here. So we'll do entry fee, take this down to like $1 or less. And we'll pick a couple of these contests here. So we'll play the dribbler. Same contest, basically the $1 single entry. I have got to restart after the stream. It's chugging here today. And we'll do same deal here on FanDuel. We'll go ahead and just kind of pick some players that, filling in a lineup, not overthinking who's going in here, trying to roughly use most of our salary. FanDuel actually is kind of nice because it tells you how much salary per player is available left. So then it kind of makes it pretty easy to just like go in and make sure that you're using the right amount of salary as you're filling in this dummy lineup. As we saw before, this lineup really only exists for a couple minutes if you do this the right way, but it is definitely makes it a little bit easier to just fill this in really quickly because we have that. So, okay. So now we're going to go ahead and click enter lineup. Success. Our lineup is entered. Great. FanDuel does have this like quick enter thing here where you can like just quickly just click this and it'll just put an entry back in. That's not actually how I like to go about doing this here. I think there's an easier way to bulk enter. So you've got your one dummy lineup in for the single entry, right? And now if we want to enter more, we'll go back to the lobby and go ahead and go back to NBA. And now we can use this bulk entry toggle. So if you toggle this on before you've entered at least one contest, it will say something like you don't have a valid lineup for this slate and you have to enter first. So that's why you want to go in here first and make sure you enter. But now we can go ahead and enter here. So maybe for FanDuel, right, this SWAT looks like a pretty good contest. I like this 20 max quite a bit. I think the 5 cent 150 max is a lot of fun. With that many entries, you basically need the total nuts to win. Still a good contest by our effective entrance standpoint, but definitely actually a pretty hard contest to win. But I like this 20 max quite a bit. So we'll play 173 entries here, which is pretty cool. So 1550, and now we just click choose lineup. We'll go ahead and pick the lineup that we just entered, our dummy lineup, and we'll enter here. So it'll just take a second. It's going to kind of process all 173 of these. But while this is processing, I see a very quick question I can tackle here. So from Nancy Drew Guy, he said, if you are putting in one lineup in a single entry, do you fill by rank or unique if you're just playing one lineup for the slate? If you're just playing a single lineup, you've one single entry, one single lineup, it doesn't really matter if you fill it with the rank fill or the unique fill. As long as you only have one lineup in your build, whether you fill with rank or unique, it will do the same thing. It'll put the lineup in there. So, but good question. Okay, cool. So 173 entries made successfully. We're all set. We can click go to upcoming here. Anyway, the main thing we'll do here is we'll go back now to SaberSim. And we'll take the same rough steps we had before. And let's go ahead and click to the main slate. Important to note, right? There's all-day slate here for FanDuel that starts at 3:30. That's the default slate that's popping up in the app right now. Always want to make sure you're picking the right slate. So I know I entered the main slate. So I'm going to go ahead and select the main slate. And we'll go ahead and we have the same thing here. So download template file from FanDuel. So we'll click this. One of the differences on the FanDuel side, one of the things that can be just a little bit trickier on FanDuel compared to DraftKings is that there's no way to just go directly to a URL and download your file for you. So you have to do this yourself. So it's going to take you to the upcoming tab on FanDuel, and then you have to click the CSV edit button. And after FanDuel thinks about this for a moment, it will bring up this pop-up, and then you can click this download CSV template and go ahead and download it. So we'll click this. Again, I get prompted to download the template here. I click OK. You can see up in the upper right, the little spinny downloads, and we go back here. And again, we can just drag and drop in. So boom, same deal here, 174 entries across these 4 different contests. They all have our dummy lineup in it for now, and we can go ahead and build lineups. Again, not going to talk too much about strategy at this point. Maybe you are tweaking ownership projections or tweaking projections or doing nothing on step 1 and doing editing on step 3, right? Whatever you want to do here. For settings, I'm going to go ahead here and use the 150 max over 50K settings for this build. I think, actually, you know what? For the example of it here, let's do these separately. So let's do this as an example. So let's go back to our entries here and I'll explain here why, right? So we have kind of like very different combinations of contests here, right? We have this 150 max that has 287,000 lineups. And then we've got a, dribbler here that has only 8,000 lineups in it, right? The sliders for those 2 contests are going to be pretty different. So we've got single entry that might be like this, right? And we've got 150 max that looks like this, right? So maybe we want to build these separately. So what we'll do 2 different builds. We'll do one for our 3 entry max and our single entry, and the other for our multi-entry stuff. So let's go ahead. We'll do single entry, and we'll do this. And we'll say we want 4 lineups. And we probably don't need 500 lineups in our pool for this. So we'll go ahead and change this to 200. And we'll do this first. So we'll get to see what this looks like when we use different builds to fill different contests. Joshua said you can reserve bulk lineups without making a dummy lineup, and that works also. That is true. I do think you potentially expose yourself just to a little bit more risk there because FanDuel will at least let you late swap a lineup that is reserved, that has no players in it, into players playing in the later games. DraftKings will not. So if something happens, and this has happened to me before, where I reserve an entry and I don't use a dummy lineup, I just reserve it, and then lock comes and I missed lock because something came up, you don't even get the chance on DraftKings to swap in players playing in the later games. So you can definitely get screwed there. But yes, you definitely can do that too. But anyway, okay, so we've got our single entry build here, right? And what we'll go ahead, we'll rename this here and call this single entry /3 max so that we can identify it easily in the entry editor. We'll click that. So we're good here. We have 4 lineups. All looks good there. And now let's go ahead and build our multi-entry stuff. So again, I think, we have 2 multi-entry contests, and one is a 20 max over 50K where the sliders are 436, and one is a 150 max where it's 438, right? Common question, what sliders should I use? Should I use them sliders that are in between? Should I use sliders that are one or the other? All of the above is fine here. I think if you wanted to use sliders that were matching the biggest contests overall, that's typically what I like to do because I like to have a little bit higher ownership fade, a little bit higher sim variance, all things being equal. I think that's fine. You could also say that I want to use the lower option. You could say I'm going to meet, actually, maybe in this case, let's just say we'll meet in the middle, right? So we'll use the sliders that are 437 for our 170 lineups that are in these 2 multi-entries, right? So in this case, 170. And maybe, since if these are pretending that these are my real lineups, maybe in this case, I increase pool size to 1,500 so that I have a bunch of lineups to mess with in step 3. So this looks good. Let's go ahead and build this. This is going to be our 170 lineups that we're putting into FanDuel for the multi-entry contests. So, I'm going to end up giving myself a pretty busy night here with late swapping if I end up playing both sites. I typically for NBA, I like to play one or the other. And it ultimately ends up generally being more DraftKings because late swapping 2 sites on a 12, 11 game slate, it's going to be a lot of work, but it'll be fun. No NBA yesterday, so I'm ready for it. Okay, cool. So we have 170 lineups. Maybe we make some exposure changes here, right? Maybe 90% of one player feels like a lot if you're playing 170 different lineups, right? Maybe we want to be over the field on Wendell Carter, but we don't need to have 90% exposure to him. Ja Morant, right? Probably can get enough leverage. Maybe we take down some of these exposures. Add a little value here. Manage our risk. Looks good. So click save. And let's go ahead and rename this one too so we don't get confused. This is a really nifty feature, you know, MME lineups. This renaming these builds. You'll see in a second. Not something you have to do at all, but especially if you're going to have a lot of builds, a lot of different lineup sets, things like that. Very easy. Sometimes I've seen people, I know Max does this. You can say like final, you know, if you're playing around the hour before lock and then you have different builds come up and news breaks and things like that, you can just say final so that you can very easily see it. Go ahead and go over here. And now we'll go ahead and fill our contests again. So in this case, we have different builds that we are intending to use for different contests. So we'll fill them separately. So let's fill the single entry and 3 max first. So we'll go ahead and uncheck the multi-entry stuff. So it's not included. So it's only 4 lineups. We'll click fill. And we want the single entry and 3 max. See what I mean? Of like, it can be a little confusing if you just got a bunch of timestamps and different lineups and whatever, but we know this is the one. We want unique here in this case, and we'll go ahead and fill it. Now you can see, right? We filled those 2, single entry and 3 max. Looks good. We'll uncheck these 2. Check in the multi-entries, 170 lineups, fill, MME lineups, final. Fill with the unique fill method. Good to go. Everything's looking good here. Go ahead and uncheck. Joshua said, why unique or maybe instead of ranked? It's just the way I build my lineups. A lot of times I group these things together and then I want a unique lineup in each contest. I don't want a duplicated lineup. If you wanted to, so let's just say what would happen if we did rank, right? There's nothing wrong with doing rank. It's just a different approach. So if we do rank and we fill this here with rank, we're basically taking the top 20 lineups overall and entering them into both contests. So the top 20 are going to show up in both. And then the remaining 150 in this 150 max are going to get the next 130 lineups, which is fine. It's basically doubling down, getting additional action on your highest rated lineups based on Saber score, projected score, whatever you use to sort your lineups. For me, I'm not typically playing so much bankroll. Like, there are other contests that I would even continue to play and add on more if my bankroll is bigger and I wanted additional action on the slate. And if I did that, I would want to even play more and more lineups, right? If you had reached the point though, maybe you don't want to play more than 150 lineups, right? Or maybe you don't even want to play more than 50 lineups, but you have 250 unique entries into contests that night, right? That might make more sense to use rank and double down on get additional action on your best overall scoring lineups and fill them that way. So using unique is going to spread out your risk a little bit more, but probably lower your overall upside. You may sacrifice a little bit of ROI because you're playing lineups that are theoretically a little bit lower EV to spread out your variance and give yourself a better maybe overall probability of having a top 1% outcome. So Joshua said, I fill each contest separately, so does it matter for someone like me? If you're doing a single build, we had this question above as well. If you're doing a single build for every single contest you're playing and then filling every single contest from that build directly, it won't really matter whether you're using rank or unique fill. They'll do the same thing. So, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead. I do want these filled uniquely, even though I will ultimately end up rebuilding these. So I'm going to go ahead and switch it back to unique fill. And we're all good. So now we can go ahead and download here. Let me go ahead and put this back up so people know what we're doing here. And we're all set, right? So we'll click download all entries, download and open FanDuel. Download is going to go. And same situation here, right? We have to click this CSV edit button. Click CSV edit. Click browse. Find the file that we just downloaded from SaberSim and edit 174 entries. Takes just a second, and then we can go ahead and we can refresh this page, and there are 174 entries and player images and things like that. So it takes a second to load most of the time, but we'll see pretty quickly here that this will all load with all of our lineups. Cody mentioned you can duplicate that way. Yeah, if you are doing a separate build for every single contest you're playing, and then filling every contest you're playing with the individual build that you tailor-made for that contest, you could duplicate yourself. Yeah. It's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. It's similar to using like a rank fill method where you're getting additional action down on some lineups that showed up in both builds. So yes, definitely can happen. Isn't guaranteed to happen, but it can. So Joshua said, that's what I'm thinking. If I do a 25 max entry with rank and then take the top 3 of that lineup and use those for a 3 entry max, that's what would happen if you used ranked fill. So if you played the 20, I know FanDuel has a 25 max. It's like a 222 25 max. And then maybe you play the $1 3 max, right? And you have both of those entries here and you build 25 lineups and then rank fill. You would have the exact same, the first 3 would show up in both contests. Then the remaining 22 would go only into the 25 max. So the last thing I just want to note here on FanDuel, and then we'll kind of move on and answer any other questions that anybody has here, is that the late swap process is a little bit different as well. And since the slate isn't live, I can't show all of it here, but I'll show as much as I can. So when you are late swapping, first of all, another very common question, right? I built these lineups here and I used different builds and different build settings for all of these. Should I late swap them separately? The answer, is really like you can. I think the theoretical edge you are getting by late swapping your lineups separately and maximizing like the edge you're getting from having the optimal sliders when you late swap is way, 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 way outweighed by the fact that you are late swapping at all and playing against people who probably aren't. And if they are, they're probably not doing it optimally. So I would recommend just considering on an 11-game NBA slate how much you might be having to late swap, how often you might be having to late swap, and how much easier it is to do it all at once. I, in general, would probably recommend you do these together. And if you are torn on where to go with what your settings should be, I would lean up for late swaps a little bit to the lower side on your settings in this case. So maybe you swap things down. Maybe you pick kind of like a middle ground. Our most extreme contest is 4-3-8 here. And our smallest contest is 4-1-2. So maybe you pick something kind of in the middle of like 4-2-4-ish. The reason why is because especially if there's news that breaks, right? We don't need to worry so much about fading ownership or having like high variance plays in our lineups as much anymore because we know the field's not going to adjust accordingly. So we just want to get some of the better plays into our lineups. You also are introducing more natural variance into your lineups every single time you late swap because we're only building 174 lineups here rather than building a full pool of 1,500 and picking the best 174 from them like we would with a normal build. So I would, group your late swaps together when possible. And if you are stuck on where to set some of your settings, I would lean towards more of the lower ownership fade and sim variance sliders for late swaps and for NBA in particular. So we'll go ahead and do this here. It will rebuild all the lineups together. Again, it is really just kind of a dream how easy this is that we've got, theoretically 174 different lineups on FanDuel here. Jokic gets ruled out after lock and everyone is scrambling to update their lineups, whether they're doing them by hand or having to undo all of the player group rules and all the stuff that they did for their lineups before lock that are now just getting in the way, and we can just do this in just a couple seconds with like no issues. So it's pretty amazing. So we'll go ahead and click download new entries. Again, what downloads here is just a new entry file. You don't need to go back to the entry editor and refill or do anything like that, right? It's an entry file. It's done. We've got it. In this case, FanDuel does it a little bit differently where their upcoming slates and live slates are separate. So when you're late swapping, you will go to the live tab. When you get to the live tab, it will look generally very similar to what the upcoming tab does. But what you'll see some, okay, great. So they have some, so you'll see some like live scores for players playing in the games, and you'll see your different live entries and your different lineups that show up here. But there will be another CSV edit button. The button looks exactly the same as it does on the upcoming tab, but you click the CSV edit button. There will be one single different step here than it is on upcoming, and it will tell you to choose the slate you are late swapping for. If you are just playing one slate, it's super easy. You just pick the only slate that's showing up there. That's what I'm going to be doing, right? I'm only playing the main slate, so I'll just pick main slate. But if you're playing multiple slates, you're going to see multiple slates there, so make sure you're picking the right one. That's a spot you can mess up, right? Because on here, we late swapped for the main slate. If you pick the turbo or the afternoon or the night slate or something like that, right? You could upload the file to the wrong spot. So click the right slate, and then you get the same looking upload form that you get on the upcoming tab. And that's how you upload your late swap lineups. So, all right, that was fun. 41 minutes. I actually think that was super useful. I haven't done that in a while. We do have some videos up that kind of break down different parts of what I just walked through separately, how to enter, how to build lineups, how to fill your lineups, how to swap, all that stuff. But I don't think I've done a full end-to-end demo of both sites, including reserving contests and talking about late swap in a while. So hopefully that was helpful. Can't remember the name of the user that sent this into support, but I will get you a timestamped recording to this entire session. Feel free to watch this. I hope this is helpful, and let me know if you have any questions about any particular part of the process that you are running into issues here. But I think this should be helpful as a way of basically learning the process from beginning to end, and going from there. Of course, there is a big elephant in the room here of, well, what about all of the stuff that goes into building the lineups, right? I said from the beginning here, I wasn't going to talk about strategy. I wasn't really going to include any individual tinkering of the lineups. If you want to learn more about that kind of stuff, best place I can say is go to our YouTube channel. Start there. So once you've got the mechanics down of how to do the things, how to enter the contests, how to get your lineups into the contests that you've entered, and how to swap and do all the important stuff like that, and now you're ready to start thinking about the strategy of like, well, what do I want to change, right? How do I want to add value? What do I want to do here? I'd recommend going and checking out the YouTube channel. We have a couple of our favorite videos here right at the start. New here, start here first. But then everything's grouped up by sport. So, and in order too, which is pretty cool. So I've actually spent a lot of time on this recently. If you guys haven't checked this out recently, I'd go check it out. But these are now kind of organized almost like courses. So you can actually watch these here video to, I know there's a lot of content here, but you can watch this bounce from one video to the next, to the next, to the next, and kind of get this complete story that culminates in the videos where either me or Max actually talk through our process. So you watch this big NFL course, for example, that starts with contest selection and works all the way through main GPPs and showdown and entry editor, and then researching stacks and late swap and cash games and how our sims work and research. And then you get to see me do my process. Same thing for NBA, right? Contest selection, then GPPs, then late swap, then cash games, then showdowns, how the sims work. And then Max's video walking through his process, and actually the office hours where they did, Chris and Max did and asked me anything about the process. And baseball's the same way. So anyway, YouTube channel is pretty sick now. And everything's ordered by sport and in the order we recommend you watch the videos. So pretty slick once you're ready to start thinking about how to actually, add some value, think about strategy, things like that. So, okay, let me get caught up on a couple of these questions here or comments. AF6 says, love how easy it is to upload back and forth in late swap. One of the big reasons I'm a member. Good stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's seriously, it is so much easier. I know we have some users that were fortunate enough to land at SaberSim first, and are maybe playing NBA for the first time and are going through late swaps and are like, yeah, this is cool. But without realizing how bad it is elsewhere or how hard this is to do elsewhere with CSVs and all these different sites, and you don't really realize how awesome it is until if you've seen the other side. But Cody said, I can't be bothered to play NBA. I don't like having to sit there all night and do swaps. Yeah, I get it. I think I have a masochistic relationship with NBA a little bit. It is like, so as I'm sitting here every 30 minutes in front of my computer, sometimes swapping two sites, there's just this part of me, and I'm like, I know other people just aren't doing this. Like I know people, there's no way people are putting this kind of effort into this. And even if they are, there's no way the lineups are getting swapped as well as they do on SaberSim. And I just can't escape knowing that there's an edge there. And I think that's why I keep getting pulled into it. Basketball is also my favorite sport. So probably the sport that I would be most likely to watch a game even without having any action going on it. So it's one of my favorites. But Rinpack's here. What's up, man? Yeah, there is late swap for Yahoo. They're continuing to kind of make some changes on their end. So we've been kind of updating accordingly here as they go along. It seems like they're kind of in a soft beta of their like multi-entry Yahoo tool and CSV editing. I know you know this. I see in the Yahoo lobby pretty frequently, but yeah, the entry editor and late swap is all like totally functional with Yahoo. Give us a heads up if you run into any issues there. Because again, like they've been pretty rapidly making changes, even like on a weekly basis, and we've been trying to keep up with them when architecture changes. But it's working, and it's pretty slick. The one thing that kind of sucks is that they don't include the contest names in the CSV file. So what you end up getting here, and I would enter Yahoo, but I don't think I have it in me to play 3 different sites tonight. But what comes up here is you'll just see like contest 45731, contest 65. You don't actually get to see the contest names. You can see the number of entries you have. You can see the entry fee, and you can kind of piece it together from there. But it is working there. I also think, and I may have to follow up with Matt or somebody else on this. I think for late swapping, so for the entry editor before lock, it's all working great. It does exactly what you expected to do. I think for late swap specifically, you may have to manually late swap the different contests separately. I don't know. At least last time I checked, I don't know if Yahoo has somewhere to put the file to late swap, to mass late swap all of your lineups at once. They have a new form field on the site that says like multi-contest editing before lock, but I don't think it works after lock for late swapping. I could be wrong on that. So, okay, sweet. They updated that earlier this week. You can mass late swap. Then we should be all set on our end. So, yeah, it does work. So, cool. What else we got? I don't see any other questions. Maybe we'll go ahead and leave it there. We've got a decent little audience here today. I saw a lot of people were joining up as I was going through my whole little demo here. So thanks to everybody that tuned in. We'll go ahead and we'll leave it there. So I will be back here again on Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern. Obviously have a full weekend of DFS here. NFL main slate coming up on us again here. So enjoy this NBA 11 gamer here tonight. Enjoy whatever else you've got going on this weekend. Hopefully enjoy some additional time with your friends and family. And I will talk to you guys all here on Monday. Oh, wait a minute. Got 2 more questions here. Not just yet. Sorry, I missed a couple questions here. Joshua said, could you go over my question for step 3? Okay, he said, I had a question about step 3, lineup percentile change option. Could you re-explain that? I think I understand it by playing with it, but I also have a question about it. Yeah, so let's do Yahoo because we're over here. We'll do a quick build. See what we get out of this. So the percentiles basically are going to... So first of all, we're building these lineups. This is an important thing to note too. And sim variance is at 5, right? by default. So what's happening here is we're basically taking like a medium, a moderately sized bucket of game sims from each game on the slate when we build every single lineup, and we're using the projections that those players score when we build those individual. We're using the projections that those players scored in that set of game sims when we build each individual lineup, right? And that gets us to express some natural diversity and variance and upside in our builds, right? Because when we get let's pick somebody that isn't showing up in a lot of lineups, right? We get this Devontae Murray lineup where he's showing up in one lineup of our 20, right? You have presumably some set of game sims of the San Antonio and Boston game in that particular case where Devontae Murray went off, right? And he's showing up in this amount of lineups roughly here because that's kind of in line with his upside potential, right? Why are we getting 90%, 95% John Morant and we're getting 5% Devontae Murray, right? Because the groupings of game sims kind of support the idea that John Morant has more upside relative to his ownership and price and other things like that, right? That's happening kind of behind the scenes automatically here when you build lineups. And the reason I want to explain that is because the point to be made here is that you don't have to change your percentiles to get the upside, right? You're already getting upside in your lineups here in the first place. What happens when you change percentiles is we are going to update every player's mean projection to the projection that they score in that particular percentile, right? So an 85th percentile is the point value that a player meets or exceeds 15% of the time. Yeah, 15% of the time, right? So John Morant, in this case, scores 56.8, he scores or exceeds 56.8 Yahoo fantasy points 15% of the time in his sims. And what we've done here is we've changed his mean projection. We've shifted the mean projection basically to say that it is now the 85th percentile, right? That's what basically happens here when you change those percentile things. The practical impact of changing the percentile is you are going to generally increase the raw upside of the lineup slightly, right? But decrease the average outcome of that lineup, right? Because in a sport like basketball, this is a diminished effect a little bit because most of the players are generally pretty normally distributed, which means that you could determine basically the player's 85th percentile outcome by just knowing what their mean was and their standard deviation, of course. But in a sport like football, where players are not so normally distributed, or definitely in hockey or baseball, right, this will have a much bigger impact on your lineups overall, changing this. And the practical impact, if you're trying to think about what this does, is it roughly is going to increase the raw upside of your lineups while decreasing probably the min cash equity. So that's basically what it does. I've seen some creative uses for this. I mean, I think from a practical standpoint, one thing that I see people do is just using the percentiles as a means to productively kind of escape the DraftKings community guidelines message. So if you build lineups for DraftKings and you get the message that you need to make 2 changes, you can just change percentile to 85th or 95th or something like that, and it has that effect of doing that. I've seen other more strategic uses of the percentiles before, but I frankly just never really use them. I don't really think there's a big point. The only thing that I use it for on a practical level is that sometimes I think it can be kind of useful to set the percentile so that you are getting lineups that kind of resemble what you think might be the winning score on that particular slate. You can get a sense of this intuition just by playing often, right? Like I actually don't play a lot of NBA on Yahoo, but let's say that a top 0.1% or a top 1% outcome is somewhere around 344 points, right? Seems pretty reasonable to me. Similar scoring to something like DraftKings. You can then kind of check this and then see what players you are getting exposure to and check that with your intuition of if that score for the individual player seems reasonable, right? Like for Kevin Huerter to show up in 60% of your lineups and for those lineups to have the kind of upside you need to win the contest, you are basically asking of Huerter to score 31.3 points. And that may resonate with you in terms of like an intuitive, like, I don't think that really makes sense. Like, I don't think that's a realistic number, or maybe you think actually that seems a little low. And actually I want more exposure to him because I think that's very attainable, right? Based on your kind of overall gut or intuition or research about a particular player. I have a lot of that kind of sense of intuition a little bit more on football, and we'll use it sometimes to do things like that. That kind of research, but that's like really the extent of what I use percentiles for. And the reality is that even a lineup that has a 344 point scoring night and ends up winning something on Yahoo, it often doesn't look like this. The winning lineup doesn't really look like every single player in the lineup had their 85th percentile outcome. You will probably have some players that have their 99th percentile outcome. You probably have some players that have their 50th percentile outcome. A player maybe that has their 71st percentile outcome, right? Like, there's going to be a lot more variety in your outcomes than a clean sweep of 85th or 95th or 99th percentile outcomes, but can still be kind of useful for that. So, and then Matt said, for NBA, what tends to be your strategy when it comes to volatile value guys popping in step 3, thinking like the Tony Bradleys, Jeff Greens, etc.? It's a good question. Because I am more or less counting on the slate changing its context in some way throughout the slate, I am not overly concerned with trying to like cherry pick the right value plays in my exposures for NBA, right? Like, let's see who the value is today. So, maybe let's just say it's cheap Timberwolves value and cheap Sacramento and maybe Portland value that's popping a little bit here today, right? From the standpoint of managing your own risk and saying that, like, I don't need I don't need 80% Davion Mitchell if he's going to be 10% owned, right? I'm going to walk that back down to 40%, 30%, something like that from the risk management standpoint. I think that's totally fine. But I don't think there's like a ton of value trying to, from a strategic standpoint, dive into which of the individual plays are the best plays at lock, knowing that you are going to probably have to be updating those anyway as the slate goes on, right? Yeah, so Matt says, was just curious because I know you tend to make most of your adjustments in step 3, whereas Max makes a lot of his in step 1. Yeah, okay. I mean, so like literally like the answer is, as it relates to my process, is I actually don't really touch that much in step 3 on NBA at all, right? Because like I don't think the edge is so much, whereas in football I'm trying to find inefficient ownership opportunities and then get under the field on a few particular, pivot plays that I think the slate revolves around, because I think that's where one of the big edges in NFL comes from, right? Is inefficient ownership. And it's true in basketball as well, but there is a way bigger edge, I think, from the standpoint of late swapping. And because news breaks in NBA so frequently, and it has such a big impact of the projections of all the players playing in that game where the news has broken, it affects the entire slate, right? So I am less concerned about trying to figure out if the field is inefficiently rostering these two guys play at lock. So who's going to be chalky, right? Who's going to be like chalky value? Like, I'm not super concerned about trying to figure out if the field is inefficiently rostering Cam Reddish at lock and then trying to make an ownership pivot based on that, knowing that anything could happen in basically any of these 6 o'clock games that suddenly make, like, you've opened up so much value because Siakam and Anunoby are sitting for rest in the Toronto game, that the perception of the way you want to handle Cam Reddish value in the Hawks game has changed, right? It's like the entire slate, besides these first 3 games at lock, are more or less a black box. And I think trying to plug in too much to the ownership at lock with exposures and things like that is just like a total mess. Or at least something that I, on the average NBA slate, don't want to dive too heavily into. Because ownership is a system of connected elements across all of the games. So that's not to say there isn't value that can be added there. I'm sure there is. But NBA is a time-consuming enough beast. I guess the other side of that coin, too, is not even just talking about the black box that is the games that are after lock, because you don't know what news is going to break and starting lineups are going to change and who's going to be ruled out. But you are also generally under the gun at lock, right? So one of the nice things that you have is that in football, right, I can sit down an hour before lock and generally know that probably nothing's going to change and have an hour to do stuff, to do research builds, to figure out where there's efficient and inefficient ownership and things like that. In basketball, like a lot of times you're getting the thumbs up, you're getting the green light 15 minutes before lock if you're lucky, right? I would not be surprised if one of these teams doesn't even have their starting lineup out 15 minutes before lock tonight. That's probably that could definitely happen. So trying to analyze the whole slate at that point, there's also just not a lot of time for it. So, I mean, the completely honest and frank answer of how I'm approaching NBA on the average slate this season is not really doing that much in step 3, letting things kind of ride and then just counting on capitalizing on edge in the late swap process. So, Joshua said, I just get scared to have all of my lineups to have the same player. Feels like if that player has a down game, then all your lineups are screwed. Yeah, all your lineups are screwed most nights anyway, right? That's DFS. Like, you're going to lose almost all the time. That's, I mean, you're really playing for the first place like once, twice season, maybe a couple times if you're lucky. So I wouldn't play scared, but with that still in mind, you can always walk down. Like, there's also nothing wrong with spreading out your risk and decreasing your maximum exposure to some of the players that you are super highly exposed to, you know? So, I mean, we ran at that test build earlier, 170 lineups on FanDuel or whatever, and we had 90% Wendell Carter, right? Who we just clearly seem to like quite a bit tonight. But like 90% of 170 unique lineups is a lot. And that might be a little bit too much for me too. Like, I might walk back some of that as well. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Spread out your risk a little bit more. So, but anyway, I am going to leave it there for now. Appreciate everybody being here, asking questions, tuning in. I will be again back on Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern, and we will pick things up there. So good luck, everybody, in your contest tonight, this weekend. And until then, take care. See ya.